Welcome back, folks, to the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show live. We are glad to have you back here on August the 3rd, 2022. As always, we'll have a fantastic guest, and it's just fantastic to have you back. We got a little Bob in the background, as we usually do, letting you know you're loved. Don't let them fool you. Oh, no. You got to stay engaged, stay woke, stay involved, do what you need to do to make sure we're getting things done. We're going to tune it down a little bit. Keep that mind of your own and do what you need to do. Hey, folks, welcome back. As I said at the beginning, to the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show live. We're happy to have you here as we just say hello and welcome to all of the folks who are out there, folks who are supporter of small businesses, folks who are Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus members, and folks who are just looking to become small business owners. We're here just basically giving you our regular weekly update on what we need to talk about, things that have happened from one week to the next that are of interest to small business owners and just to folks in general. As I straighten up my glasses here again, I gotta fix these glasses, man, one of these days. But anyway, what I do want to tell you is I'm glad to see that you're back, glad to see that you're here with us. And man, it has been a smoker out there, hasn't it? Man, it is hot. Woo! Man, I just came back from San Antonio. I thought San Antonio was hot, but Virginia is on fire. And we just also, it's August. August, you get all kind of weather, and there's some things that we have to, just keeping in mind with that. There's been some terrible things with floods in Kentucky and wildfires in California. I mean, so folks, just stay safe, keep yourselves safe. And, as I start off every show, I always start off by saying to you, you know what? I sure hope that you're keeping yourself safe from COVID. The COVID thing is still going on. Folks are still contracting that and other things. You even got this other monkeypox thing out there, which is not a COVID thing, but it is something that you need to watch out for. So, when I traveled this week, on the plane, I kept my mask on most of the time when I wasn't eating or whatever. And, I'm just asking you, are you doing what you need to do to keep yourself safe? Are you making sure you're taking time to get your vaccinations? First one, second one, booster, even a third booster. I just say, hey, if it's going to keep you healthy, going to keep you here as a member of the family and voting, wherever it is that you come down, make sure that you do it so you can be here working with us here and making this place a better place for all of us to exist in. And it's just fantastic having you here. I'm excited. We've got a great guest. And there's so many fantastic folks to talk about. It's always interesting having people come on the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show and tell us about, what it is that they do and how they participate to making this civic society a better and a more comfortable and delivering great services to American people across the country and also across the world, but more importantly, right here in our own backyard, in our own neighborhood. We have different folks on the show. So listen, I'm just going to start off by saying that and say, hey, this has been an exciting week too. Before I do my thing, what I usually talk about, and I'm going to get there. Don't worry. I'm going to talk about it because this is show number 59. And we're going to cover all the things we love to talk about. But in particular, we have to keep banging on this, voting rights. That's right. I said it, voting rights. That's right. I said it, voting rights. So we're going to get back to that. Everything is at the foundation of what we do in this country. All comes back to your participation at a minimum in voting rights and your other activities. But you know what? Before I get into that, just want to talk about a couple of other interesting things that you've probably been hearing about. And there was some fantastic legislation that the Democrats managed to get signed and get into law was really that Burn Pick Act for our veterans. Now, that was a fantastic thing. That thing turned around quick, didn't it, folks? So you really have to thank yourselves for that. You have to thank yourselves for staying engaged, staying involved across the country. This is not just a Virginia thing. This affects over 3 million veterans. Folks, I come from a family of military. My wife is retired Light Bird, Army. And, I'm a military brat growing up. I have lots of family members who serve in the service. My dad served for 30 years in the Air Force. So listen, I'm definitely for supporting that. And even he was a Vietnam vet, and they had that whole concern, with Agent Orange. And this is something similar to that with those burn pits. They even had those back in the 60s. So we're really proud of the fact that the Democrats led the charge on that and really got that legislation passed. The other fantastic thing that came about was also the legislation that also was the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Looks like, the Democrats managed to broker another great deal. Basically it's a $739 $1 billion bill. I'm looking at this little summary I have over here. I just want to kind of go over that because I thought that was really interesting. Hey, you got to talk about these victories when Democrats get it done and get it done with whoever we need to get it done with. They're basically raising 15% corporate minimum tax. That's raising $313 billion. There's a prescription drug price reform for another $288 billion. IRS tax enforcement, $124 billion. Carried interest loophole, $14 billion. So total investments that are happening from that is $433 billion, which energy security and climate change is getting $369 billion. That's a lot of money. And also the Affordable Care Act extension for another $64 billion. And plus the other $300+ billion went towards reducing the deficit. So not only are the Democrats getting it done, delivering services to our service people with the Burn Pit Act, but they're also getting things done to reduce inflation, to provide additional energy security and climate change investment, as well as the Affordable Care Act. But a lot of people like to see the prescription drug pricing reform. So all of that is coming down the pack. So we've got some interesting things that were done this week. On top of all the other things with the American, with the American, I'm tripping over my own words here. With the ARP, which is providing all the other good stuff that we provided in 2021. So I'm talking about 2022 stuff. We haven't got everything done, but we need to stay focused. As I said, just saying that, I want to say that that's just an example of if you stay focused and get what you can and pass that legislation, you don't get everything in one bite, but you do get a lot of things that helps move the needle in the direction of where we want to go with investment and resources. So when we talk about these other things that we need to get done, and you know what it is, it all goes back to voting rights so that you can make this effort a little bit easier. Because if we elect more Democrats in the Senate and we elect more Democrats in the House of Representatives, and we hold on also while we have the presidency for the next couple of years, we can get even more things done. More things that were in the Build Back Better Act. And one of those things was voting rights. One of those things was the George Floyd Policing Reform Act. One of those things that we now have to look at is trying to get a legislation passed to protect a woman's right to privacy. And there's so many other things. I'm just naming them, but the deal is you have to be involved. You have to be registered to vote. You have to be talking to your congressperson, and you have to be voting on all three levels. You have to be voting on your local level. You have to be voting on your state level, and you have to be voting on your federal level. I've been talking about things happening on a federal level, but everything bubbles up from local things that happen in your community to make things happen across the country. So I think we can pat ourselves on the back, say we got something done, and getting something done is part of it. But the other part of it is, what can we get done in the future and in the near-term future with the elections coming up in less than 100 days in the House of Representatives? We need to increase that number, and we need to hold that number. And I think things are looking good because people are motivated. I mean, they're motivated because there's so much out there that is coming at Democrats and coming at Americans that they're not happy about, and they need to know they need to hold the line where they are and add to that number. So get registered. Don't wait till the last minute. make sure you are registered. And, I'm going to go back to what I usually start to talk about, because it all starts with your right to vote. And I'm going to step through it like I step through it every week. And I'm going to go right into it and just keep telling you. So everybody wasn't around when this legislation happened. They kind of thought, hey, Roe versus Wade, that'll never get overturned. Man, that's been around for almost 40, 50 years, however long it was. No one is going to actually try to turn around a woman's right to privacy, the woman's right to her own health care and care over her own body. Well, guess what? It changed. Just like the things happened with the Voting Rights Act in 2013, it changed. And let me tell you where all of these things come from. I know some of you folks weren't born then, but I was born in 1960. I wasn't old enough when this first one came out, but the first of these three major civil rights acts that buttress all of our civil rights and civil rights related legislation come from these initial three acts. And one of them is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, right? The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It has provisions in it and that basically also forbade discrimination on the basis of sex as well as race in hiring and promoting and firing. This was passed in 1964. That was the first leg of that trinity of civil rights acts that brought us to all of the modern civil rights that we have in this era now. And the next one that came after that was the following year. And guess what that was? It was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That's right. That act was signed into law in 65 by LBJ. It outlawed discrimination in the voting practices that were adopted in many southern states after the Civil War. Things like literacy tests or prerequisite to voting, or count the number of bubbles on this, or can you recite the Constitution? But those sort of things are happening now. In 2013, the pre-clearance portion of the Voting Rights Act was knocked down by the Supreme Court, decimated. And that pre-clearance, I'll tell you what that means. And that's what HR 4 and HR 1, that's House of Representatives Act number 4 and number 1. I'm going to get into that, but basically, quick story on pre-clearance, and I'll get into a little bit deeper. Before anybody could change any laws in this country having to do with voting rights, pre-clearance meant it had to go through the Department of Justice first to make sure everything was even and fair across the board. Talk to you a little more about that later. So I just talked about, right? I told you about the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I told you about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And now for that third and final leg of that trinity of basic civil rights, modern civil rights in this country, is the Fair Housing Act of 1968. The 1968 Act expanded on previous acts. It did prohibit discrimination concerning the sale, the rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, and sex. It was later amended to also address handicapped people and family status, whether you're married or not, or LGBTQ or whatever your family status is. They couldn't discriminate against you based on that alone. And known as Title VIII, it also was known as the Fair Housing Act of 1968. And you see those pictures that are down there. Another thing that LBJ signed into law. These things gave us the basis for moving ahead. Now, just think about it, right? So in 64, you got your basic civil rights. It says, hey, no discrimination based on how people look, how they pray, where they live. You can't do that. That's now outlawed, okay? Then they said, okay, and the other thing was, oh, guess what? All right, I can, people can't discriminate on based on how I look or my race and my or where I'm from, but they're also discriminating against me when I tried to go vote for people I want to vote for. And they were like, okay, people were fighting in the 60s and marching, and they were pressing their local, state, and federal politicians to say, you need to pass something that makes sure that we have unfettered access to the voting polls. Because if I can't vote for who I want to vote for, and people are basically causing me bodily harm or either making me answer all kind of crazy questions which I can't answer, then how am I going to be able to pick the politicians or the person who I want to elect, who's going to take the ideas that I want them to bring forward for laws and legislation in this country forward, not just civil rights or related stuff, but all kind of things. I'm a small business, and there's tax policy, there's being treated unfairly because of your business, and just a number of different permutations, a myriad of things. I'm using big words, myriad, permutation. That just means a lot of different stuff. That's all it means. But if you don't have voting rights, you can't address any of your concerns for your business or your family, even keeping yourself safe and your family safe. Okay. And then the final thing that we got done in 1968 was the Fair Housing Act. Because once you had your basic civil rights saying, I am a man, I am a person, don't mess with me, then I can vote, right? I am nobody can mess with my voting. Now they're saying they can't discriminate where I live. So the Fair Housing Act happened in 1968 that basically said I can live where I want to live. And if someone tries to discriminate against me regarding where I want to live or money that I can get for a mortgage for my home, or when it comes to valuing my property, all of those things, for most middle class people, their home and their home ownership is where most of us have our largest investments that allows us to start small businesses, to pay for our kids' college and other different things. Home ownership is basically a hallmark of what we have in this country that allows the average person to basically save money and invest, other than, things that you may have in the stock market or 401k, whatever that retirement account stuff is all about. So basically, that's the deal. That is what we had in place. And what we're trying to make sure is that we put something back into place that got taken out in 2013. Let me tell you what that is quickly. That is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. This act basically says, before any states can change anything, like I said earlier, they have to take it through the Department of Justice. Specifically, the bill proposes to modernize Voting Rights Act formula for determining discrimination in states and locality. It also says that you have to declare any changes into the voting rules at least 180 days before an election. Also, it gives authority to the federal government to make sure they can send federal observers and monitor jurisdictions for potential risk of discrimination at the polls during voting. But more importantly, the pre-clearance piece, and I will say it again, this bill establishes new criteria for determining which states and political subdivisions must obtain pre-clearance based on their bad records for being discriminatory before any changes to voting practices in these areas may take effect. Pre-clearance is the process of receiving pre-approval from the Department of Justice or the United States District Court for the District of Columbia before making any legal changes that would affect voting rights. So basically what that does, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act basically says, you got to run it through us first. You guys have a bad record. Now, what has happened since 2013 is exactly what was happening before 2013 and why the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was established. As soon as that was knocked down by the Supreme Court, just like with Roe versus Wade, as soon as the Supreme Court knocked down that legislation that had been in place for 50 years plus, you started having more than 40 states and over 400 and some odd voter suppression bills started to come out from all these different states with all kind of crazy rules. So saying, we're going to reduce the number of polling locations in your area, so it takes you, 5 hours to cast a vote. Basically, they're hoping you won't stay, you'll go home. Or if you want to try to bring some people food and drink and wine because in an area where it's extremely warm or extremely cold, whatever it might be, you provide some sort of sustenance so people can stay in line and vote, and they won't go home because they have to, get something to eat or take care of something personally. These are the sorts of things that they're doing. They're trying to kill voting by mail or absentee voting, which makes it easy for people to basically fill out a form that the government provides them in their state and drop it off at the designated drop-off boxes. So it's easy for people to vote. They can vote in advance. They can go to the polls the day of, but they're trying to get rid of all of those sorts of things, which are significant advancements that have been around for decades, and people are falling for what is the big lie that was told by our opposition in order to say we're going to do these things, when in fact all of that went through the courts and none of it was found to be valid. So they're trying to do things where our competition controls the legislative houses in various different states, and they're passing these laws. So these are things that we got to deal with and have to be ready for this November. Okay, so that is what the pre-clearance piece is about in the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. But the House of Representatives decided to take it one step further, and they came up with the For the People Act of 2021, which basically expands access to the voting box, reduces the influence of big money in politics, strengthens ethics rules for public servants, and it also implements anti-corruption measures so we can keep our democracy safe. And let me give you a couple of bullet points. So here's what they tried to do, or what they did pass in the For the People Act of 2021. They basically wanted to expand access to voting, as I said, add automatic and same-day registration nationwide, 2 weeks of early voting for all voters, banning the purging of voting polls, right? Of voting rolls. Basically, if you didn't vote for one election, you come back, you think you're still registered, you go to try to vote, and they're like, hey, you didn't vote last time, so guess what? You're not on the rolls, therefore you can't vote, or you have to have some sort of provisional vote. Well, all those sorts of things are forms of voter suppression. And this law says you can't do that. So all 50 states and territories that vote in American elections, the United States elections, everybody plays by the same rules. And also, this also restores the full protections of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which was decimated by the Supreme Court in 2013, which is a pre-clearance piece I was telling you about before, remember? And also, there's finance reforms, banning foreign money loopholes. There's election security, independent commissions to prevent gerrymandering, grants to help states replace voting machines and other processes for auditing and securing our election results. Because our competition is trying to do right now is they are working hard to control the state Secretary of State on the Secretary of State position on a state level, which basically oversees elections in a state. So even if you go through all those obstacles, if you have someone who's not independent and they are the Secretary of State and they're not following the law, what they're going to try to do to say, yeah, you voted, but we don't like the outcome, so therefore we're going to throw this over into their House of Representatives or whatever on a state level and try to change the results of the election. So we have got to stay on this, folks. You don't want to be one of those people who said, hey, what happened? You want to be one of those people who say, I know what's happening, and we need to stop that from happening before it actually happens. Because how can my small business be successful if I got people basically taking my vote away from me, so I don't have the proper representative for my family and for my business? These things are extremely important. And so I'm going to go to the next one, folks, which is the Senate. The Senate basically passed a bill that was known as the Senate Bill 2747, the Freedom to Vote Act. It took some of the stuff from the HR 1 and HR 4, included things in it like national automatic voter registration, prohibitions on voter roll purging, like I said before, and federal partisan gerrymandering, improved election security. It also improved ethics legislation and standards for all three branches of government. One of them is by requiring the presidential candidates to disclose 10 years of tax reforms, sounds familiar, and prohibits members of Congress from using taxpayer dollars to settle sexual harassment suits. Furthermore, the bill aims to curb corporate influence in politics by forcing super PACs to disclose their donors, requiring government contractors to disclose their political spending, and prohibiting coordination between candidates, super PACs, and other reforms that are in that bill. So it is a significant bill that was passed, was tried to get passed by the Senate. That was not passed. And what happened was last time we lost a couple of Democrats. We were unable to get rid of the, filibuster. So everything basically stopped. So what's the solution, right? What's the solution to make this happen? Guess what? Here's your call to action. You want to call your senator, call your representative. You want to make sure that tell them you know about HR 4, you know about HR 1, you know about Senate Bill 2747. You wanted to get to the president's desk or some version of that, and you want that passed because voting rights are fundamental to any democracy. It's like air to our body. If I don't have air, I die. If you don't have votes, guess what? You wither on the vine of democracy and you die because you have no representation. These things are extremely important. So week 59, I'm saying it again. And I'm always coming back to you saying, hey, don't be discouraged, be encouraged. You know, I'm kind of smiling, I'm bubbly. You know what? Because I know we can get this done. We've done it before. We can do it again. Trust me, these things were all law. We passed them before. We've done this before. So guess what? Just because it's hard doesn't mean it can't get done. Get out there and get on it. Folks, let me tell you also, I'm going to leave you with a couple of tools that are out there. We got a fantastic activism act that's out there. Your call to action is, hey, get this 5 calls app, put it on your phone. And then it's very easy to do. If you got a Google phone or you got an Android, something like that, you can get that version of it, which is called 5 Calls, which basically allows you to call all of your contacts in Congress, tell them what you need, but it automates the process. You just choose the issue, they show you who it is, and boom, it does all the work. And it's free. Same thing for Apple phones. You got the same thing. Now listen, these are the least you can do. You can also get out there and support your candidates. You can support them with your resources. You can support them with your time. You can support people who don't even live in your neighborhood. You can support anybody across the country because you've got a phone. You can do all kinds of things. You can send your resources. So, hey, get excited. We need to get this done. There are a lot of stuff that I know people don't like that's going on out there. So make sure that you are getting involved. Not just voting, but doing everything you can. But if voting is all you can do, we love it. Get it done. Get out there and get on it. Now, listen, I've got to turn it over now because I'm coming to about the 30-minute point. We got a fantastic guest. After I get off my soapbox every year and I tell people about, hey, this is what democracy looks like, march on for voting rights. Hey, listen, this is what you need to do. And I'm not some real fancy guy. I'm not all slick and clean like they have on some of these shows. I just try to just give you the plain, simple truth in simple language so you get it and you know what to do. So we've been doing this for 59 weeks running. We're going to keep it up until we get the change we're looking for. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take time to introduce our fantastic guest we have for this week. And this guy is pretty cool. I met him a few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks, but I was like, wow, I love meeting people. People are out there in their community getting things done. I don't care whether you're a barber, you're a politician, you're an artist. I mean, everybody's playing some sort of role out there and everybody votes and everybody basically wants to see the right thing happen. And when they have an interesting background, I try to bring them on the show. So let me stop talking so you can hear who I'm talking about. But first I got to introduce him. Folks, I want to tell you about Paul Ferguson. Now, Paul Ferguson, he is the clerk of the Circuit Court of Arlington. And I'm trying to get my technology together here. Wait a minute here. There, Circuit Court of Arlington and of the City of Falls Church. And he's had that job since January 1st of 2008. I think they have like 6 or 8 year terms or something like he's won a couple of terms. This guy's been pretty prolific in getting things done. And he's got a couple of things that are his basic policy priorities. Improve the technology for the courts and also make sure that there's great communication with the public. Those are his two big policies. And I think that's great because you need good technology to get things done. You need to be listening to people. So if you're communicating with them, that's a two-way communication. He's making sure he's listening to what people want. Also, he served on the board of the Virginia Clerks Association, which is the VCCA. He was also president until 2018. And currently he serves on the Virginia Access to the Justice Commission. And just a few other things, I'll run through them real quick. He's done so much, he's probably got more, but I just tried to bullet it out here real quick, folks. He's the Arlington County, he was on the Arlington County Board from 1996 to 2007. He was also chairman at one point, and there was out of those years, he was chairman, I believe like 3 years, chairman of the board for the Arlington County Board. Also, he's was on the board of directors for Northern Virginia Parks or Nova Parks, and this thing called Viridiant, which was formerly Earthcraft. If I chewed that up, Paul will tell me whether I messed it up. Also, he's involved civically, the Kiwanis Club, Leadership Arlington 92, past president of the Virginia Association of Counties. He's been president of Civic Associations, Virginia Board of a Dentistry member. Dentistry? I didn't even know this guy was a dentist. What else does he do? Okay, he's not done. Let me tell you what his background is. He's also he's been chairman of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. He's got a great education background. He's got his JD. If y'all don't know what that is the Juris Doctorate. That's a fancy way of saying he's a lawyer from George Mason Law School, local guy, 1992 graduate, BA or a BS. He's got one of them. I think it's a BA from James Madison University. He's also a local guy, graduate of Wakefield High School in Arlington. He has a beautiful wife, Karen Keys, and 2 adult children, and they live in Arlington. Folks, without further ado, I want to bring out of our virtual green room and onto your screen, as soon as I press the right buttons here, my good friend, Paul Ferguson. Hey, what's going on, Paul? Man, we're glad to have you come here, man. You know,
well, thanks for that introduction. That made me sound pretty good. Listening to you talking about voting rights and the great couple weeks that President Biden and our Democratic Congress has had, we really need to get your show on MSNBC because I think most of your viewers are in Virginia, but you talked about the holdup on this Voting Rights Act, and that's really the senator from West Virginia and Arizona. So that's where those Democrats need to put pressure on those 2 senators. Now, we don't have as many Democrats as we'd like in West Virginia, but we got plenty of them in Arizona. So Senator Sinema can't help the Democratic Party. I think when her term's up, it's time for a different nominee, whether we win or lose that race. But that's a whole nother question. Then you said, what do we got to do? It's Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. If we could win there and get to 53, then some of these things that you're talking about could become a reality.
Hey, man, if we could get to 60, that golden number, man, it's game over. Hold the house.
That would be nice, but
the presidency.
I don't think we'll get there. You know, when you look back on President Obama's years, that's what was so unfortunate. When he got in there, he had 60, and then Senator Kennedy died. And President Obama, I think you and I will probably agree, was one of the greatest that we've had. But as great as he is, he didn't do things quickly. He's kind of methodical and thoughtful in the way he does things. And sometimes he'll admit he's a little behind schedule. And so he took a little longer than he would have liked maybe to get going. And then we lost Senator Kennedy, and then we got down to 59. And who would have thought we would have lost that Senate seat in Massachusetts? No. And then all of a sudden, we weren't able to get anything through that we wanted to, or wasn't able to get through quite what we could have done. But that would have been 2009. Looking back on it, it's easy to be Monday morning quarterbacks, but that was a window that was a missed opportunity, as much as President Obama accomplished.
But we got nothing but opportunities abound in the future, man. We got some great stuff that's going to happen. All people have to do is plug in, especially when they hear about more of your background. I just gave them a little piece of you, Paul. You got to tell people more about what you do, because this is why they're online. They want to hear me talk.
Thanks. Well, one of the things that's fun about being, it's great to be on your show, Mark. I did 12 years in local government, and you were nice enough to point out that, despite the need for this good federal legislation, you look at our Northern Virginia localities that have very progressive governments, really now even going out to Fairfax and Loudoun and Prince William County have some very progressive local governments, and they've made voting very easy. The state has enacted laws to allow localities to have early voting, and in any of these localities, there's no reason why you can't vote, because they give you from like the end of September on, and you can go use a drop box, and they've even got some Sunday voting. So there's plenty of opportunities. So
as I always say, I want to interrupt you real quick. As I always say, we made it so good, so easy. We got ourselves voted out on the executive. Complaining about it, problems with voting in Virginia from the other side, man.
You identified a problem. Republicans are allowed to vote too, so they just assume that if more people vote, that Democrats win. But occasionally Republicans get fired up too, and they certainly did. They had a few hot button issues that helped carry them in a very close election, closer than many people realized. Former Governor McAuliffe could have held that, and I think he did better than many people realize. But I won't go down that path. So what I like about you can talk about the importance of being clerk in the court. There's a lot of things that go on in that office that people don't know about, but it's also nice, as you mentioned, you didn't know if I had a 6-year term or an 8-year term. Really going back to the Bird machine, the court were the most powerful people, elected official, in even more powerful than the senators and the congressmen, because the clerk of the court got a big salary, and especially in a rural jurisdiction, they were a big fish. And then the state legislators, the House of Delegates and the Senate, city council people, board of supervisors, they don't make much money. So the clerk was the sort of one that helped lay hands on who the different candidates were. And if you go into some rural areas, the clerk is usually pretty well known. Now, in Northern Virginia, most people don't know who their clerk of the court is, and that's okay. When I was on the board of supervisors, I'd venture to say most of my constituents didn't know who I was until they had a problem. If they had a problem, then they'd figure out who was their board chairman or a member of the board of supervisors. So if you're doing a good job, most people don't pay too much attention to who their elected officers are on the local level, which is unfortunate in some ways, but it's okay in some ways too if you're an incumbent. So anyway, what would you like to talk about? Would you like to hear about what the clerks does and why I think the average person should pay more attention to the position?
Absolutely. I'm sure.
One of the things you talk about, voting rights and ballot storage, all over the country, you hear about some close elections. And in this last presidential race, whether it was Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, there was some recounts that were going on, Pennsylvania. And if there's recounts that are going on in Virginia, the last time we really had it in Virginia was an attorney general's race where Mark Herring had a narrow victory over a guy named Obenshain. And the vote was very, very close. But during those recounts, it's the clerk of the court that stores all those ballots. The clerk of the court stores the ballots for 2 years. So you want a clerk of the court that you can trust. Out in Colorado, there was this crazy lady, and she was giving away all the data to the people that wanted to come in, the election deniers, and contest things. And so that was a real violation. And she ran then for Secretary of State. This is Kim Davis. Another reason why it's important, you saw in Kentucky with the same-sex marriage issue. Well, there was a clerk in Kentucky, then the Supreme Court made same-sex marriage legal, but she wasn't going to grant the same-sex marriage permits. So
I remember that.
that could be a problem. In Virginia, may she rest in peace, but the former clerk of Prince William County, Michelle McQueig, she was the person on the lawsuit that tried to say that same-sex marriage was illegal. So you can have a clerk cause some problems. Now, the other thing people don't realize about the clerk's office, we are the repository of all of the land records. So that means if you're buying or selling a property, if you want to just go check on your deed, that's where it is. It's in the clerk of the circuit court's office. If you refinance your property, it's going through the clerk of the circuit court's office. So you want someone competent there that can give you access to your deed. You want someone that can make it easy for you to access that. One of the things we've done in Arlington is we've set up a system when people have to prove their residency so they can enroll their children in school. They got to get a copy of their deed or a copy of their lease. So we have a system to make it very easy for them to access. I'm fortunate that my land records manager is a former member of the Arlington School Board. So that was her idea. I can't take credit for it, but certainly that's going through our office. The other thing is, if you have jury duty, you're going to go through the clerk of the circuit court's office. Now, it is an obligation of your citizenship to serve on jury duty. But it may be that you get summons on a day that's not so convenient for you. So you want a clerk of the court's office that's going to work with you to hopefully get it deferred to a day that might work a little bit better for you. But ultimately, you're going to have to serve. One of the awesome things about serving in Arlington and the city of Falls Church, and I'm guessing it's the same thing for Fairfax County, is that people realize why they need to come in for jury duty, that people have a right to have a trial by their peers, whether it's a criminal case where you're accused of the crime, could be falsely accused, and you want to make sure you have a jury that looks like you if you're out there. Yeah. And that includes people that don't necessarily speak English as their first language. So sometimes people will come in and say, I don't think my English is good enough to speak. And I say, well, it might be that the defendant only speaks your language and we've got an interpreter. So you might know some things on the jury that I don't know. It's a team approach on a jury. It's 12 people for a felony, 7 for a misdemeanor. In a civil case, it's 7. Sometimes there's an alternate or 2 in those cases if the judge so chooses. But it's important that we have a jury pool that represents all of our citizenry. So someone that tells me they don't speak too much English, I tell them, me habla español un poquito. I might not speak too much Spanish, but I can talk a little bit and let them know that their English is probably better than my Spanish. Usually it's Spanish, but there's all kinds of other languages that our constituents might have. Another thing that we do is if you're getting married, you got to go get your marriage license at a clerk of the circuit court's office. So you want that to be easy. And if you don't speak English as your first language, you want to make sure that there's translation into Spanish, at least for you. So the other thing that we do, unfortunately, if you want to get divorced, you go through our office. We have an extensive packet out there for people that are trying to represent themselves. I don't recommend it. It's not easy. It's much better to have an attorney than not, but some people just can't afford it. So we do our best to give them as much information as possible. Another thing I do, Mark, is I sign all the gun permits, the concealed weapon permits. And so we as Democrats don't necessarily agree with the concealed weapons law, but that is something I have to do. I have to follow the law. And just as a humorous note, when I was a candidate for the Arlington County Board of Supervisors in 1995, the biggest issue out there, people don't remember, was that was the year the state legislature passed the concealed weapons law. And so I said that if I was elected to the county board, I was going to do my best to get that law repealed and to lobby our state legislature. My opponent, Republican opponent, who did not wind up winning that election, he was an incumbent, he said, what does that have to do with local government? That's a state issue, Paul. You're talking. I said, no, that's important to our constituents. So little did I know that one day I'd be signing all these gun permits. So I feel like it's my penance that the NRA is making me do. I have to sign hundreds of these permits every month, and they're kind of small, and my hand starts hurting a little bit. My office says they don't want to have like a signature machine, that I need to really sign them by hand. So
every one of them,
every one of the concealed weapons permits, and you know, I think it's important as Democrats for us to keep an open mind and for our positions to evolve. And certainly in 1995, we had great gun control legislation that was then repealed, and then now we've gotten some of that back in. But we still don't have the 1 gun a month, and that seems like a pretty reasonable, piece of legislation to maybe get through. But
to me,
that's not that easy to get through, even when we get the majority these days. So, I didn't like the law in 1995 that allowed people to apply for a permit and carry a concealed weapon. But if you think about it, the law doesn't prevent anybody from going to a restaurant and putting down their gun right on the table. It just prevents them from concealing it. So, the conservatives make an argument that guns, that people that take the time to take the training and actually get the concealed permits, they're usually not the ones that are committing gun violence or committing crimes. Now, that's not always the case. And the state legislature did pass a law that allows concealed weapons permits to be taken away from people that are convicted of spousal abuse or even charged with it as a preventive measure. So those type of things need to happen. But for the most part, if it's legal to carry a gun, now that's a whole other question. I would like to see restrictions on people just being able to carry a gun openly and put it out there in the restaurant. But as long as this Supreme Court has said that's legal, I don't mind that people that are taking the time to get a permit have the opportunity to carry a concealed weapons permit. Now, I really am worried about the Supreme Court if there's a test case saying people don't even need these darn permits. You have a right to carry a gun. You have a right to carry a gun. Who says you have to go get training to have this concealed weapons permit? Who says you got to go to the clerk's office every 5 years and get the permit renewed? I can see that type of litigation coming up, and the Supreme Court maybe saying, even this law in Virginia, which used to be considered somewhat out there, the conservatives pitched maybe too restrictive. So anyway, let
me ask you a question. I know
around a little bit on that issue.
As a small business, I thought you were a small business owner. You could tell someone you didn't want them to have a firearm in your place of business. You could stop them from bringing. You're saying that the law is now, whether you want to have one there or not, they can still in Virginia. Well,
I believe that in Virginia that there is that right to restrict. Now, you look at it, then Georgia, they just had to cancel a big music festival because you have these big things like Lollapalooza. That just happened in Illinois. Unfortunately, my younger son just goes out. He's 20. He went out to Lollapalooza, and it's thousands of people coming for these outdoor concerts that are kind of Woodstock like, and so they had to cancel it in Georgia because it was determined they no longer had the ability in Georgia to restrict guns on private property. Now in Virginia, I think we still do have that right, but it's a real question that could come up at the Supreme Court at some point too. So if you got a small business, you got the right to restrict it. In Virginia, you've got the right to restrict it in governmental facilities, in the courthouses, schools. There's lots of parks. There's lots of places in Virginia that even people with concealed weapons permits, based on Democrats who had control briefly, got good gun control legislation in. So currently that exists there. But I do worry about someone challenging it with this Supreme Court when you consider that John Roberts is now one of the liberals on the court. You got a gang of 5 there that is really conservative.
Yeah, that is true.
I touched some of the things. The other thing I want to just add quickly is we have the Office of Probate. So if you have a loved one pass away and you're going through a difficult time, our office helps you get through that process. And that's whether you're in Fairfax, Loudoun, Northern Virginia, you got that everywhere. So anyway, I'm doing all the talking, and you need to do some of the talking and ask me.
No. I want to listen to you. I just have a question I want to ask you. Yeah. So with your policy on communication to the public, because a lot of the stuff people don't know, where do people go to get the information that a lot of stuff that you say comes up on a regular basis, but people don't really think about it until it actually happens? Like you mentioned, probate court, right?
Right. We keep as much as we can on the website. You go to the Arlington Circuit Court website, first to the Arlington County website, then you get to the Circuit Court, then you click something for probate, and it would go through all the things you were going to need to do before you come in. It also gives you some of the things that the probate office does for you. One of the things that you can do is you can file your will in your local circuit court, your original will, for $5. That's a bargain. $5. Now, so what happens, Mark, is, 25, 30 years from now, you're in your 90s, you pass away, and your kids are saying, where's Dad's will? Because you didn't give it to him. One of the first places they can look is they can say, did Dad file it at the courthouse? Now, you'll probably tell your children where your will is. So if that communication is good, but it's oftentimes a difficult thing for parents and their children to discuss, and so that is an option for everyone to file their original will in the circuit court. So
does that prevent the estate going into probate because they have that file?
No, it doesn't. Now this is where I am a lawyer, but I'm not supposed to practice law or give legal advice.
Okay.
But there are some things that you can do to try to avoid probate. Probate taxes aren't that high. It's not that bad. But mainly without giving legal advice. So you can title things jointly, even in addition to your spouse. You can do that with children and things like that, so that accounts automatically pass, whether it's property or bank accounts.
Okay. Well, that's all good stuff.
So the office does a lot of things that people don't know about. You want to have someone that's competent in there, and you want to have someone that agrees with your values, so that things like if you're a same-sex couple, then you're not going to have somebody saying, no, I'm not going to I'm not going to give you this. I don't believe in that. Now, we don't have any clerks in Virginia that do that, even Republicans. So
that's a good thing.
You could have. It is a good thing.
What's some of the other stuff, man? Tell us some of the other stuff we ought to know about you and what you do that are popular things at the circuit.
You talked about a lot of issues at the start of the show, and the most important issue for you is clearly voting rights.
Absolutely.
And I think I've got to agree with you in some ways, because if we get our votes suppressed, there's no way we get elected as Democrats and get any of these good things done. Now, I do think there could be some compromise on that issue, just like we saw some compromise on the climate bill. I guess the bill's called the Inflation Reduction Act, so I need to refer to it as that. But there was some good things for the climate in there, not nearly enough of what we need. But if you look at what the Republicans did with abortion, they didn't get the whole enchilada at the start, and they still feel like they've got work to do to try to make it legal in 100% of the country illegal. They slowly chipped away at it. So with climate change, it's better to slowly chip away than to not chip away at all, and let our partners know worldwide that we're making an effort and that we're trying. So I'm very excited at what passed. But in addition to voting rights, the most important issue to me is making sure we stop the warming of this planet, because it's going to survive. We're gonna get through probably the rest of the century. But people say, what about 2050? Well, what about 2100? I don't have grandchildren yet. I think you said you do. I'm worried if I do have grandchildren. I may not be fortunate to have them, but if I do have them, what things are going to be like for them. And what I see right now is there is a shrinking amount of habitable land. You already see that, like with this floods in Kentucky. I mean, it's tragic what's happening to some people, whether you're in Kentucky or the wildfires out in California. And so there's going to be less and less available land worldwide. And if you have enough money, you're probably going to be all right in the near term, but it's going to create hardship, and eventually, we're not going to have any land left. And that, wouldn't be maybe 2100, but that's at some time in the future. If
that horizon is not far off.
If we don't stop this warming. So, while at some point in my career, I felt like I was scaring people and saying, look, this is really about survival of the planet. It's really not an exaggeration at this point, and people can see the starts of the effects of it coming, and it's going to be tough, even if we get our act together right now. So you talked about Viridiant. We used to be called Earthcraft Virginia, but what Earthcraft Virginia is trying to do is get developers to build energy efficient buildings. And we, as Earthcraft, we're giving them a green stamp of approval, hopefully cost them an extra $900 per unit, but hopefully, some of the people that are buying properties would be willing to pay that green premium. We were finding more and more people were not willing to pay even that little extra green premium, the average person. You and I would, and many Democrats would, but not necessarily the average person. So we changed the name from Earthcraft Virginia, which clearly sounds like a environmental tree hugger organization, to Viridiant, to be more business-like. And it seems to be working. We've got a lot of support from developers out there, and that's what the mission is of the organization. So I'm trying to keep my fingers in the pie of some of these environmental organizations. One of the best things I've seen politically out there, I don't know if you've done this on your show, is the group out there that is Clean Virginia, that they're matching Dominion's development. So if you're a state legislator, you got to get money. We understand that, and Dominion is someone that's going to want to give you money. But what Clean Virginia is saying is, if you don't take Dominion's money, we'll give you the money instead. And so if you agree that
these things,
that our environmental problem, you agree with us more on environmental issues than you agree with Dominion. Now, if you're a Republican, you might agree with Dominion more than a Democrat would, but it gives Democrats and even some Republicans out there the opportunity to get some money from an environmental organization or environmental PAC. And the only thing you have to agree to is that you won't take Dominion's money. Now, I'm straying down the line, but we talk about what went wrong in the last election. We had a lieutenant governor candidate out there who signed the pledge from Clean Virginia, took the money from Clean Virginia, and said, I will not take Dominion's money. And then a week before the primary, before anybody can really react, she takes $100,000 from Dominion, and then takes more money from Dominion in the general election. So there's plenty of candidates that I support out there that have taken money from Dominion, because we got a wide variety of issues out there as the Democrats, and we can't afford to have absolute litmus tests. But when someone agrees they're going to take the Clean Virginia money and they're not going to take Dominion's money, and then they take the Dominion's money, that's wrong to me. So I won't name her, but she was our lieutenant governor nominee, and I think she's planning on running for state senate. She will not be my choice, even though I don't live in that area.
Let me ask you a question, though. Do you think the public is more educated about environmental issues than they used to be? I mean, what do you think the current state is? Maybe you can just speak for Arlington or Virginia. Your thoughts? Unfortunately,
no. I mean, there is a group of people that are active and care, but when you do polling, it doesn't come up as a top issue for even Democrats, unfortunately. Now, if you talk to Democratic policymakers, and I put you in that group, Mark, because you're an opinion leader and you're someone that has influence, they'll tell you that very well should be at the top of the list. If you look at our Congressman Don Beyer, that's clearly at the top of his list.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But are we making the progress with the public that I'd like? No, we really aren't. And is it still a partisan issue? Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be a partisan issue. I mean, the
environment.
In fact, I used to try to explain to school children, one of the differences between Democrats and Republicans is Republicans tend to have more money, not always, but Republicans tend to want to have policies to help people keep more money and to pay less money to the government for programs that we as Democrats would like to see more of. So if you've got money, you should want to preserve this earth, and you should want to preserve things for your grandchildren because you got something to pass down that's good. And so to me, it's just crazy that they would be for policies that's burning things up. So I truly there are Republicans out there that do understand the issue. Unfortunately, I don't think any of them are in Congress, but there's definitely some of them out there, and they're committed to trying to propose market-based solutions that we can all agree on. You know, you look at James Baker III, George Shultz, who passed away. There's a couple other what we used to think were pretty conservative Republicans. They're considered liberal Republicans, I guess, or rhino Republicans. They came up with a plan that was a carbon tax that was market-based that we should have all been able to agree on, but not one Republican in Congress would sign on to what James Baker III, who used to be the preeminent Republican strategist and campaign manager, but so we've really taken some steps backwards as far as trying to get consensus and to trying to get it to be at the top of people's radar. So as far as what I still volunteer my time as and clerk and some issues that I spent time on with the Board of Supervisors, the environmental is what I try to still do. Nova Parks, you mentioned that we have some good green policies, and there's some great parks out there that people benefit from that they don't even know is Nova Parks. Like if they ever go on the WNOD bike trail that starts in Arlington and Shirlington,
that's you guys,
and goes all the way out to Percival. That's Nova Parks. We maintain the bike trail. We got all the easements.
Taken that bike trail many times.
Yeah. So we try to put our signs up. We need to put more Nova Park signs on that bike trail, letting people know that is us. So
let me ask you a question when I was reading your bio, it says, and the City of Falls Church.
Yeah,
that's work out that you're both jurisdictions.
Right. Well, in small jurisdictions, I talked about the land records being the repository of all the deeds.
Right.
So if you're the City of Falls Church and you've got 15,000 people, to maintain a land record system would be very, very expensive.
Okay.
So like the City of Fairfax, they go with Fairfax County Court.
Right.
That would make sense. But they are an independent city.
Right.
So Falls Church used to outsource their circuit court to Fairfax County. But in 1986, they made the decision that they'd prefer to be with Arlington County. So if you get a speeding ticket in the City of Falls Church, which if you drive down Route 7 and you're driving more than 25 miles an hour, you are probably going to get a ticket. I don't know if you've ever driven down Broad Street there. But they strictly enforce that in the City of Falls Church. So you don't even want to go 3 or 4 miles over that speed limit.
They're going to ticket you.
If you got a ticket, they have local general district court in the City Hall at Falls Church. But if you appeal that ticket to the circuit court, which is your right to do if it doesn't go well in general district court, you're going to come over to Arlington and have that in the Arlington Circuit Court. So they have a district court office in the City of Falls Church, but they've outsourced their circuit court. And you see that across Virginia. Most small jurisdictions will turn to their neighboring large jurisdiction to outsource their circuit court.
Well, I've got a question for you. I asked all of my guests who come on the show, and here's my famous question.
Okay.
If you were king for a day and you had that magic scepter, and all you have to do is say, make it so, and wave that magic scepter, what would you do?
Do I only get one piece of legislation, or do I get a day where I can pass 10 things through Congress? Or
Put it this way. I'm leaving the question open to you. You got it. You can make it happen. All you got to do, what's the one thing that you would do first of all that you would make happen? What's the most important thing to do?
Significant climate change legislation through Congress, much more so than in this Inflation Reduction Act. I'd like to see a carbon tax, and I'd like to see that money return to good environmental programs, but I would be willing to compromise on that. Republicans would like to see it as a tax cut And so it would return, if that's what gets through, where the carbon tax is then returned to people in a progressive manner, so that low-income people benefit from it, I would be all for that. But a significant piece of legislation that regulates power plants, that creates huge incentives for everyone to have the opportunity to use solar power, as part, might as well throw in that bill end subsidies for oil and gas. Just make one really good environmental bill. If I could only do one thing, that would be what it is. But Mark, you could make a good argument that if you don't have the voting rights bill, you can't even get that opportunity. But
but listen, you had the magic wand, so it's going to happen anyway.
Well, no, if you had a magic wand, we'd pass them both on the same day,
Hey, you know what? That's fantastic. I knew you were going to say that. I said, I know he's going to say something to do with the environment. So you're staying true to your beliefs, the things that you talked about. Paul, I would love to have you back again, man. I try to keep people within the time period.
You got the wrong guy if you're trying to keep within the time period.
Hey,
so
we can have you back, though. That's the thing. We'd love to have you back.
One thing I got to say that I didn't have on my resume, I had a sports community access show. I had a sports community access show before the guys did on the 106.7. So I feel like what you're doing now could grow to something much bigger. So I applaud what you're doing, Mark, and I'll let you sign me out. And thanks again for having me as a guest.
We love having you, Paul. So remember, you got to have you back on the Virginia Democratic Small Business Caucus Show live, and we'll do the sports thing next time. I'll see you later. Right. Take care, man. I got to find my button over here somewhere.